Hi, it's Eric again, and it is time for another game design exercise. Today it is Utopia 2099, an exercise that comes from The Rules We Break. Utopia 2099 is a tabletop game design exercise, and it's all about working with the system. It's slightly trickier than some of the really simple playground style games that we sometimes use, but it's still really easy to learn and to play. I find that it is a fantastic introduction to systems thinking, to balancing complex systems. It's also interesting because it works particularly well as an online remote exercise, or you can do it as a physical tabletop exercise, which is how we're going to demonstrate it today. But at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can run it using remote video. Let's jump right into what you learn and what you need. Well, like I said, this is an exercise about balancing systems. We are going to be working with the chaos of luck and randomness. And we're going to talk a little bit about representation too, the way that you can depict characters and content through dynamic procedures in games and interactive systems. All right, what you need. So designers are going to be working in pairs. You need about 60 to 90 minutes. You also need to download the game sheet. So these are a PDF that you can download. There is a link below. So you're going to be printing these out. You need one sheet for each pair of players, and you're going to cut these in half. You also need writing utensils, something to write with. You're going to be writing on those sheets. You need dice, six-sided dice, 2 for each designer. And then you also optionally need tokens. You don't need tokens or small pieces, but if you have them, they are nice. You can also keep track of stuff just with pencil and paper. Okay, so as usual, I am going to lead us through the steps of the exercise as if you are running it, wherever that happens to be, with your friends or colleagues, your creative team, your company, your classroom, wherever that goes. And we're going to go step by step through the exercise. The first thing that you need to do is set everyone up into pairs and distribute the material. So you're going to be having the designers work in pairs, and each pair is going to need one of these sheets. So this is the top half of this sheet. So this is just the top half, and this is the sheet that each pair needs. Each designer needs 2 dice. I'm just going to color code them here. It's totally not necessary to do that. So each designer needs a pair of dice that they're going to use to play with. And then you need some kind of pile of tokens, about 10 tokens per designer. So we'll have our pile of tokens here, and we're ready to play. The game of Utopia 2099 takes place after a global climate catastrophe, and each of our 2 players is trying to find happiness for their tiny community amongst the dangers of the collapse of civilization as we know it. The player who achieves enough happiness first wins the game. And these tokens are going to be used to keep track of happiness as you go. To start off things, to start playing the basic version of the game, I like to demonstrate the game in front of everybody. So maybe gather everyone around a table and just play through a few turns and explain the game pretty much as I'm going to do it right now. So what happens in Utopia 2099 is that each turn, each player rolls both of their dice, and then you are going to resolve the dice in order. You can see that on the sheet here, there's a little chart, sort of a lookup table with all of the 6 dice. You always resolve the dice from the lowest to the highest numbers. And so in this case, we're going to first look for 1s. Okay, there is a 1, and we're going to resolve that first since it's the lowest number. 1 gives you 1 happiness. All right, so the red dice player earns a happiness for their community. There are no 2s and 3s, but there is a 4, and a 4 is a wall. So a wall defends against 1 raid for this turn. All right, so red player has a 4, and the blue player rolled 2 5s. So a 5 is a raid, and a raid, it says an opponent without a wall loses 1 happiness. So here's what happens. You remember that the wall defends against 1 raid for this turn. So the blue player actually is going to raid twice on this turn. One of the raids is going to happen, and actually the wall that the red player rolled is going to defend against it. So each wall defends against 1 raid, but the second raid of the blue player is going to make the red player lose 1 happiness. So at the end of the first turn, actually, neither player has happiness. It looks like their communities are really struggling, and we're just going to take another turn and play again. So let's see what happens this turn. In this case, this player has a 1 that's a farm. That gives them 1 happiness. There's no 2s, and both players roll walls, and then this player rolls a 5. So again, a 3 or a 4 is a wall, and a 5 is a raid. So the red player would raid, but the blue player has a wall. Okay, and they would roll again. Okay, so some other things happening. The blue player got another farm, and it looks like they have a wall which protects them against a raid, but the red player rolled a 6. So a 6 we haven't seen yet, and that is a thief. And a thief, it says, steal 3 happiness from opponent. So whereas a raid causes you just to lose happiness back to the pile, a thief actually takes happiness from one player and brings it to another. Now, it says that you want to steal 3 happiness from your opponent. In this case, the blue player only has 2, so the thief will take as much as they can. In this case, it's just up to 2. And there we are at the end of 2 turns. So I think you get the idea. Each turn you're going to roll, and players will accumulate happiness. When one player has 10 happiness or more, at the end of the turn, at the end of a turn, then they win the game. If both players happen to have the same amount and it's 10 or more, then you play another turn and see where you are at the end of that, and whoever has more happiness would win in that case. And so that's basically how you play the game. There's just a few tricky things as you're explaining it that you want to emphasize. One is that you want to always resolve actions from the low numbers to the high numbers, and as long as everyone kind of follows this chart step by step, it should be pretty straightforward. Remember the difference between raiding and a thief. A raid causes you, so if this was a raid here against this player, they would lose a happiness to the main pile, but a thief actually takes from one player and brings it to another player. If both players happen to roll a thief on a turn, they cancel each other out and nothing happens. Let everyone play a full game once you've explained it and there aren't any questions. Then once everyone has played a game, move on to discuss. Some people might finish a little bit early, in which case you can let them start a second game. But once everyone has finished a single game, then it is time to talk about it. All right, so what are some things that you could, some of the ways to talk about this game? So a really good place to start is just asking everyone to analyze the game. Maybe talk about what's working and what's not working. Now, some common comments that you're likely to get are that walls are boring, right? But go a little bit deeper than that. Ask exactly why walls are boring, and there's actually a number of reasons for them. One is that they happen twice as much as any other piece. You're going to see a lot of them. Maybe you're just seeing them too much and you get tired of seeing them. Another thing is that oftentimes, unless your opponent rolled a 5, walls just feel useless. So it feels like kind of a wasted action. In addition, they're a defensive action rather than something that feels like it's sort of gaining you happiness. So there's actually many reasons why they might feel boring. Another comment you might get is that thieves feel overpowered. Thieves are OP, right? Too strong in the game. And actually, it's quite tricky. But remember that with a thief is not just 3 times as good as a raid. With a raid, you lose 1 to the pool, but with a thief, 3 actually go to your opponent. So this is a difference of just 1, but this because one player goes up while the other player goes down is actually a difference of 6. So this is actually a mathematical difference of 6. So that kind of subtle difference explains why the thief action feels very overpowered. So there's actually, within an analysis, there are some subtleties that you can pull out of even this very simple game. Another interesting thing I think to talk about is the pace of the game. So what is it that contributes to the pace of the game? What makes it shorter and what makes it longer? What among these actions pushes it towards a conclusion and which lengthens it out? Now, a question to ask as you're talking about the game and the pace is, what is the right pace of the game, right? Obviously, if it starts to feel too long and dragged out, it can start feeling less interesting and boring, right? But on the other hand, if it's too short and the game is sort of over before there's any chance for drama to build, it might also be a problem for the experience of the game. Okay, another comment that you might get as you are talking about the game is that there's actually no choice in the game. And that, as weird as that might sound, hopefully someone brings that up because it's really true. There actually is no real decision making in the game. You are just each turn rolling your dice and you're simply doing what the chart tells you, which is, once you realize it, you realize, well, actually, the players might have actually been having some fun playing this game, even though there's no actual decisions being made. So that's one thing to talk about. How can there possibly be a game that is engaging or interesting without any choice? Now, there are some other examples. There's games like roulette or pachinko. There are some games of pure randomness, also without a choice. And although in this game, you're not really betting money or winning money or spending money. So it's interesting to talk about how a game can be meaningful without choice. Another thing that might come up is just randomness, right? There is a lot of luck in this game. There's a lot of randomness. Since you're not making choices, everything is dependent on the roll of the die. So it's another thing to sort of start keeping in mind is, what does it mean to be designing or modifying a game where randomness plays such a strong role? Okay, so there, again, a lot to talk about. But let's get to the next step of the exercise, which is adjusting the system. So it's now time to actually start making changes. Okay, let's talk about exactly what it is that they can change about this. So you want to walk them through the steps and make sure they understand what it is that they can change. So here's all the things that they can change during this step of the exercise. One thing they can do is they can adjust any circled number. So you see these numbers here. Farm gives you 1 happiness, artifact gives you 2, a thief steals 3 happiness from opponent. So any of these numbers that's in a circle, you can actually make changes. And by making changes, I mean they're actually going to be writing here in these blanks. You also can change, in addition to that sort of detail about exactly what does what, you can change which die numbers do which actions. By the way, these changes are also listed right here on the sheet. So you can change which die numbers do which actions. Maybe that means you want to make 1, 2, and 3 all farms and completely eliminate walls entirely. So you can double up, you can get rid of actions. But the one exception is that the thief has to stay in the game, only appear one time, and must appear in slot 6. So you can see it's already written out here. So the thief will definitely appear, although you can change how much they are stealing. The other things you can't change. So they cannot change the overall game logic. They can't change the winning conditions. So 10 happiness is still going to be the way that you win the game. But otherwise, there's actually a lot of flexibility, a lot of choices within all of these ways that you can change the game. So what's going to happen is, like I said, they're actually going to be writing in the sheet. So this is just a sample. In this case, it looks like they got rid of artifacts. They they changed farms to 3. They've got 2 farms. Wall is only in 1 place. Raid is happening twice. And it looks like they nerfed the thief, so they brought the thief down a little bit. So, you know, they're welcome to make changes, rewrite, scratch out, and make any of these adjustments that are listed here on the sheet. Now, as they play and start to design, keep a few things in mind and be sure and emphasize this to everybody. One is that you want them to design through play. There's a tendency that they want to talk about things, debate, come up with the best idea before they try anything, but this is definitely another shut up and play moment. You don't want to discuss too much, make a couple quick changes and change it. You don't even necessarily need to play a whole game. Maybe you make one change, play a couple turns, you realize that's not going to work or do what you wanted, make another change, but also get through a whole game. Another thing to keep in mind is the why. So they are not just randomly making changes to the system. They're not just randomly writing things in here. They should have a reason for making any of these changes. Now, if they need to be reminded, return them to the analysis, right? What did you analyze? Maybe they said walls were boring. Can they address that? If these were overpowered, they can address that. If they thought that the pace of the game was too long or too short, can they adjust that through the changes that they make? So there's actually a lot of things to think about, but the main thing is that a change in the game should be trying to fulfill an idea they have about how to make the game better. And one more thing to emphasize is that there are no fundamental changes to the game rules or logic. So it's very circumscribed, the things that you can change, right, in the game. And again, they're also listed here on the sheet for everyone. You may have people chomping at the bit. They want to add choice to the game. They want to get rid of the thief and do something else entirely, but you're actually going to encourage them to balance within constraints. It's definitely part of what they are learning. This is the heart of the exercise now, right? It's happening as they make these changes, adjusting the system. So this is where we are designing through play. They are trying stuff out. They're seeing how it works. They're making changes. They're iterating. And you want to get them there and make sure everyone is kind of doing that. And they should hopefully be able to play through a whole game or 2 or 3 or 4, trying out different changes, seeing how they work. If these sheets get much messier with things scribbled out and crossed out and rewritten, that's all for the better. Hopefully about 10 or 15 minutes of playing and designing is all they need. And then you can discuss what happened. The way I like to do this is take everybody's sheets where they have written on them and bring them all to a central table and lay them out so that you can see what happened and see what people wrote. And for this section of the exercise with all these sheets laid out and you're discussing what happened, I like to start by just comparing. So have everyone take a moment, take a minute, and see everybody's sheets and see what they did. What were common approaches that everybody seemed to take? For example, nerfing the thief or reducing walls. But was there anyone that did something really unusual? Did anyone, for example, I don't know, put negative numbers in the circles or make the games really super short because you're earning so much happiness on a turn? So take a look and find what people did in common and what people did that's differently. Again, there's no right or wrong because we are designing an experience here. And so you are thinking about the way that these systemic changes result in an aesthetic experience of the game. So this is really what's interesting about this exercise, is that there is no wrong or right approach. It's a subjective question about what is the right way to make these adjustments. But it's something that you figure out as you go. How do your tweaks to the system result in a certain kind of experience? And it's also okay to acknowledge that they are designing within some very strong constraints. And you definitely are limiting what they can do. But it's really good to make the point that that is part of what the design practice is. In a sense, we are simulating a real-world situation where changes are constrained. So if you are a game designer working on a video game team, it's always easy to dream up completely new features that could happen in a game. But if you can solve a problem, maybe it's a problem with pacing, making something more interesting or more fun, more enjoyable or engaging for players, if you can change that aspect of the game just by adjusting numbers in a spreadsheet, within the code, rather than adding whole new features and interfaces, it's always going to be faster to try out, cheaper for the production team, and have less ripple effects throughout production. So in a sense, the very strong constraints that we're doing here are simulating the challenges of actually doing game design on the job in the industry. Okay, so again, a lot to talk about here, discussing what happened after they adjusted the system. Now it's time to move to the next phase of the exercise, adding expert characters. So this is going to open up a whole new part of the game. Again, at the beginning, I talked about these sheets that you're downloading. We've just been looking at the top part, but the bottom part of the PDF is the expert. So now you're going to pass out one of these to each pair. So each pair is going to get one of these. And this adds a whole new layer to the game. So this is how the experts are going to change the game. Before each game is played, so we've got our two players set up here. They don't have happiness yet, so all the happiness is here in their pile. They're ready to play, but before they start, each one is going to pick one expert. They're each going to pick a different expert, and their expert is essentially in slot 6. So if the red player picks a spy and the blue player picks the historian, when the blue player rolls a 6, they're going to get the historian power, and when the red player rolls a 6, they're going to get the spy power. So experts always are in slot 6. The rest of the slots, they are going to just follow whatever this pair, whatever they balanced and decided that this was the right balance for the game. So that's how expert work. Just to quickly go through what the expert powers are, the historian lets you re-roll both dice and take both actions. So let's say you rolled this, you would do the 2 and then the 6, then you can actually re-roll again. In this case, you would do the 1, you got the historian again and re-roll. Wow, and as you can see, you can get a lot of extra actions with the historian. The engineer lets you raid, but with a strength of 2, which means it's twice as powerful as a normal raid. The opponent would lose 2 happiness. And the spy, the next turn, the opponent does not roll at all. So if the blue player was rolling, had picked the spy at the beginning of the game, then you have that character for the whole game. They roll a 6. The red player would not roll at all next turn. So those are the basic attributes of the expert characters. Okay, so what are they going to do? In this version of the game, as we add expert characters, their goal is to balance the extra characters so they can start making adjustments. As you can see, there is space here for them to write and rewrite and change things about the characters. They want to make adjustments to how these work. And they can actually even completely redesign one of the expert powers as long as you feel it meets the criteria. So this is the criteria. The criteria are listed here, and let's summarize them. So one of the criteria, as they make changes, as they're sort of adjusting these expert powers, is that they want them to be balanced. So because both players get to pick whatever expert they want at the start, in terms of power, in terms of advantage, you want them to be balanced. You don't want one of them to always be better or be worse than the other one. They should be fun. So yes, they should be engaging, right? We talked about the pacing of the game. They should add to the enjoyment of the game. And then another thing is they should be themed properly. So that means that the identity of the expert, all we have is a name: historian, engineer, spy, or thief. They should feel like it. So does it feel like a spy? Does the power of the spy feel like a spy? So all of these things are important. Again, these criteria are also listed right here on the sheet. Now, you cannot change the power of the thief, although it's going to have the same sort of balance that you had before. And they should start doing just what they did here, although they're not going to change the basic numbers. They're only going to change the experts in this phase of the exercise. A few points to talk about before they get started. One is, okay, if this is the criteria, what is the process going to be? So what we have here is actually a wicked design problem, because if you're trying to balance all of these experts against each other, it's a many-to-many problem. Like all of the different combinations of the thief versus the historian, the engineer versus the spy versus the thief. How are you going to balance that? You don't have time to play them all out against each other, especially if you keep on changing them. Then you're going to have to play them all against each other after each time you play them, right? One approach is to have a pivot point. So if the thief here, you've already determined what they are, maybe you just decide to lock the thief into place. So play them each against the thief. Part of the point here is that when you're solving a design problem, the most important thing for you to think about is, what is the process or methodology that we're going to use to move forward if we're trying to balance a complicated system? So in this case, thinking about having a pivot point of the thief is a good way to think about that as a design process for still achieving all of these different criteria one by one. The last thing I want to talk about is this idea of themed. I think it's really interesting, the idea that rules or procedures, right, in this case the special ability of a character, should really feel like the character, right? Does it feel like a spy to kind of like to freeze the other player, to keep them from doing something? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But it's just a little bit of a taste of this idea that we talked about earlier of procedural representation, one of the things that they're learning. In other words, in a game or interactive system, we can use rules and dynamic procedures to actually depict stories and content, in this case, characters within this world that we're building of Utopia 2099. So this is a little bit getting into that idea, and even though it's just a taste of it here, it's actually a really powerful way to think about the ways that interactive dynamic systems like games can express identity and character and story. So again, even within this very simple little game where there's no choice going on, there's actually a lot going on in terms of understanding, designing the experience and the aesthetics of how a system works, inventing a process to balance and even thinking about representation as well. So let them go at it. Hopefully 10 or 12 minutes is enough, and of them emphasizing the same things that we did before, designing through play so that they're really shutting up and playing. In this case, they might be making some fundamental changes to the expert characters. That's okay. If they're making deeper changes to the expert characters, but they're still not changing the basic game or the winning conditions. Okay, then once you feel like everyone has done that, they've had a taste of their expert players, it is time to wrap things up with a wrap-up discussion. So what are some things to talk about here? Again, I think comparing is really good. Have everyone take their experts. Okay, let's see, here's a sample sheet. So in this case, these designers decided not to change the historian at all. They nerfed the spy a little bit, and it looks like they changed the engineering power to something completely different. So get everybody's sheets on the table, put them side by side, give everyone a chance to do it. Did anyone, for example, add choice to the game? What are some interesting, unusual approaches that people took? Were there any new characters that people decided to introduce into the game? Okay, another thing is to talk about now is the system balance. So now that they have had a few, ANCE, now that they have had As always, hard to talk and write at the same time. Now that they have had a few chances to run through the whole experience, you can talk about the fact that they are balancing with Utopia 2099 a heterogeneous system of different parts. You have different characters with special powers. You have different dice with different effects against each other. And this is a very common kind of game to be designing today. Role-playing games, esports and MOBAs, collectible card games, roguelikes. So this idea of balancing a heterogeneous system where you have many-to-many problems happening that takes a lot of playtesting and strategizing the process is a very common kind of game to be designing today. But it's also really similar to designing a complex, any kind of complex process, creative process or organization or community. In fact, talking about the process is a really good thing to have happen as maybe the end of the discussion. Have people share what they actually did. Did anyone find anything interesting about how they found they had to work as they were working on balancing the system and trying to keep everything in mind, all of the different parts of the system that they were balancing. So having them share that process at the end can be a good way to wrap up the discussion. And it's always great to see everybody's games all spread out against each other, what everybody decided to do, and really celebrate the weirdness, always celebrate the weirdness, not just the people that made kind of safe balancing decisions, but maybe people that went out on a limb, did something really unusual, even if it wasn't wholly successful. We always want to celebrate quote unquote failed experiments. Okay, so that is Utopia 2099. The last thing I want to talk about is that if you are running this exercise online, it happens to work really well online. For the remote version, it still works in pairs, so you're just going to have them in a breakout room instead of being at a table together. If they don't have dice, they're in person with each other. There's plenty of ways to roll dice online. Try typing roll a die into a browser and see what happens. Now, instead of the sheets that you're going to pass out, you can instead create a digital document that everyone can access. And so what that will mean is that you're going to type the main lookup table. So that is right here. It's going to look like this. This is for the first phase when they are just balancing the basic system. And everyone is going to copy this text and paste it into their own document that they're working on with a pair and that they can use it to balance. Now, once they've had time to design it and it's time to adjust the system and then discuss what happened, they can paste their text, their individual text, back into the main document. And then that lets everybody compare so that you can see all of the solutions together. So then again, you can do the same thing for the expert. You can basically get the text that defines each expert, put it into a document, have them paste out into their own document, then have everyone paste their own individual versions back into the main document. And it actually works incredibly well. Okay. So that is Utopia 2099. I just really love the way this incredibly simple game, which astonishingly has no choices at all in it, still gets right to the heart of systems balancing. Here it is in rules of play. You can see that there's even a section here in the book that can help you as you're going through a remote video situation. And in fact, I should say that this exercise evolved when I was, during the pandemic, when I was teaching online and I was trying to think of a way to do a systems balancing exercise that you could do just through remote video. This is actually a very flexible and expandable exercise. I have done versions where everyone completely redesigns all the experts, they retheme the whole game, or everyone takes a single version of the basic game and then there's a huge list of experts that everyone balances together. So there's a lot of ways that you can use this exercise. If you do use Utopia 2099, as always, perhaps as I've described it here, whether it's online or in person, or maybe a more weird and wild variation, please let me know. I'm always excited to hear about how these exercises get used. And of course, I'm always super interested to learn how to improve them and make them better. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.